Thank you very much for coming to our webinar today. My name is Dan Hawtrey. I'm the founder and MD of Content Formula. For those of you that don't know, Content Formula is a consultancy that specializes in intranets and digital workplace tools. So we consult on, we design, we build, and we support intranets and digital workplace tools. And in particular, we focus on Office 365 and SharePoint as the key technologies that we use. So if you take a look at the intranet software industry over the last few years, there's been quite a big transformation in the last couple of years. If you'd come to us 2 years ago and asked us to help you with your intranet, we almost certainly would have suggested that you build a custom solution on SharePoint, really sort of customized and tailored to your specific organization's needs. Fast forward to the present day, somebody comes to us, we might consider that building a custom solution is the right solution, but we're actually far more likely these days to recommend that you use an off-the-shelf solution and build your intranet using that. And there are all sorts of reasons for that type of recommendation, and obviously that's what this webinar is all about. So as a consultancy in this space, we actually work with an off-the-shelf solution. It's called Wisdom Intranet. The reason we chose that solution is because it's very mature, it's got plenty of features, and it's very easy to use. But anyway, I just want to reassure you, this isn't going to be a salesy webinar. We're going to try to keep it as practical as possible. We're not going to talk about Wisdom in any great length. We might refer to it at various points to illustrate some points in the webinar. But yeah, the intent is to keep it fairly generic. At the end of the presentation, we will show a couple of screens of Wisdom, and obviously if you want to know more about Wisdom, which is the technology that we sell, then do please get in touch, and we can do a demo or talk about it and talk about your requirements. So what are you going to learn today? So with the main objective of this session is that you'll be able to make, at the end of it, you'll be able to make an educated decision about the type of approach which is most suitable for your organization. And so we're going to be explaining the key differences between off-the-shelf intranet solutions and custom solutions. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons of those two solutions, and we'll be going into quite a bit of detail. But so without further ado, I'm actually going to hand over to John Scott, who is our head of user experience design at Content Formula, and he's going to run the majority of the webinar.
Hi everyone. Okay, so first of all, let's just define what we mean when we say off-the-shelf and custom build. First, starting with off-the-shelf, essentially this means that you buy the intranet software like you would a software product from a retail store. You go in, you take the box literally off the shelf, and that's what the analogy means. You don't have the opportunity in this case to actually send the software company, of course, your requirements up front and wait for them to build it. They've built it already. You just need to decide and look at the list of the features that it has and decide whether it does what you need it to do, and make a decision on whether or not you can use it in the way that the software developer intended. And then we go to custom build, on the other hand, essentially meaning that you decide on the specific requirements and you write them up, you detail out what it should do, you maybe draw up as well things like wireframes to specify the plans for what the software should do, and then you brief somebody else. That could be an internal department within your company, or it could be a third-party software developer. You brief them to develop software for you to your exact specification, matching your exact business needs. And what's built is built for you and your organisation and nobody else. So what off-the-shelf options are there, and what kind of features do they offer? So just like there are off-the-shelf software products for other situations, there are obviously ones for catering for intranets, and this makes a lot of sense because a lot of organisations have very similar requirements, at least for the most part, but not all off-the-shelf intranet platforms or products are the same. There are a few different types. So the first one is one that's a standalone platform. So an example of this would be the Facebook platform at work. These ones don't require an underlying technology platform like SharePoint, or for example, or another platform. Then the second type is products that do require an underlying platform that they're installed into, and this might be a platform again like SharePoint or something like Drupal maybe. Then there's a third type. Some products, they interact with an existing platform, but they don't actually sit within it. They display content from and write content to another platform, but they don't actually reside within it. And then others are installed into a platform and allow you to use all the regular features of that platform alongside the new ones that are introduced by the new product that you purchased and you've installed. And then finally, there's a different type of product, and really the last one is they're just a set of templates that you install into your platform, and they're typically sort of less mature products and require quite a lot more time to install and configure. So also, these products can come as self-hosted, so the company hosts it themselves, the software. It could be cloud-hosted or vendor-hosted, and so on. And sometimes the same product is available in each of these different guises. So self-hosted, meaning you install the software on your own servers, cloud-hosted, meaning you install the software on a cloud hosting platform like Azure, for example, and vendor-hosted, meaning the software company who sell the product, they host that for you. Could be on cloud, or it could be even on their own dedicated environment. So features. What features do the off-the-shelf intranet products typically offer? To start with, branding. So normally each product that you could buy will allow you to apply your company's branding and logo, so that the intranet looks at least like it belongs to you in your organisation and it aligns with other media, both printed and on screen. Some products do allow you lots of flexibility when it comes to branding and the look and feel. There's news and announcements. So news and announcements really has become a staple. It's been an internet staple for years, and most, if not all, intranet products will offer this. Usually they'll have the ability, these days at least, for employees to comment on the stories, or at least like the articles and so on. And quite often there'll be different types of news or channels that you can filter by or subscribe to, so you can make the news that you receive more relevant to you as an individual. And sometimes you'll also be able to set up email alerts so that you're alerted via email when certain news articles are published. Then there's events. So it's fairly common for intranet software to provide a facility for you to publicize organizational or industry events, and they're typically presented in a calendar format, but also they can be in a list of upcoming events like we see here. And often the different types of events are supported, so you can have controls to filter on the type of event that you're seeing, so that you can see the stuff you're interested in only. And you can see that in this screenshot here on the left, that you've got filters. Less common, but sometimes included, is the ability to actually subscribe to an event or register for an event. But at the very least, it's typical or usual that you'd have an option to add an event to your calendar. Then we have policies and procedures. So having a central place for all the company policies and procedures is really like a big win for an intranet, and it's often a key part of the content. And most intranet software has a feature for storing, organising, and searching through policies and procedures, regardless of the actual department who owns that policy or procedure. So the users don't have to know that. Then there's department sites as well. So although some intranets are, particularly these days, more focused on tasks and less centered around the structure of the organisation, there is still generally a need for a sort of a shop window for each of the different departments or functions within the business, and these areas are typically dual purpose because they're kind of like a concierge desk for the department's internal customers, but providing them with access to frequent tasks or questions that they may have, as well as finding key people in that department. But also they provide an entry point for staff who actually are working in that department to the sort of back office area of the intranet, where they might have their departmental information like departmental KPIs or their collaboration areas and so on. Then we have collaboration spaces, or sometimes called communities. Of course, intranets are not just about broadcasting information and the occasional question or comment. And as intranets have evolved to be more than information stores and more like digital workplace tools, the emphasis on employee collaboration has increased. Why work together on improving processes and iterating knowledge over email when you can have a much more tailored and open experience on the intranet? And these collaboration spaces typically allow groups of people from any part of the business to share documents, edit documents together, share announcements or milestones, and so on. And they're typically used for both short-term projects with a defined endpoint, or for ongoing topic area communities, like for health and safety, for example. Search is another area. It's probably the area where the least time is invested in the range of intranet products that are available. Often the search is barely modified from the search that comes with the underlying platform. And this is sometimes because the underlying platform actually has quite a lot of features when it comes to search. And the problem with search really is that it's how you use it that counts. There's a lot you have to do to make it work for you. So with search as well, typically you'll have the ability to provide different preset search verticals or scopes. So in this example, we see that the verticals or scopes of the search are everything, people, policies, and news, which is just under the search input box. So we can change the type of content or the area of the intranet that we're looking in. And then there are also refiners or filters that you can have on the left in this example, that allow you to restrict the results based on categories of information that you're looking for. There are also other features in search. An example is promoted results, where you can manually show certain search results for specific key terms that people would search, and that can help to give your search a more sort of tailored concierge-like sort of experience. Yeah, so these are just a sample of some of the features commonly used, found in intranet products, off-the-shelf products. But there are, of course, others too. Here's a selection of others that we've seen being offered. So FAQs, widgets, or web parts, whole learning management systems, ideation tools, form builders, meeting room booking, canteen menus, and holiday booking. So depending on the product, they will offer different apps or features like this. So what factors do we need to consider? So off-the-shelf products do offer a lot of features, but a custom build can give you exactly what you want and nothing sort of superfluous. So as a rule of thumb, if you find that your requirements are fairly generic and the same as those offered by an intranets-in-a-box product, then you should probably opt for buy, not build. But if your requirements are specific, very specific to your business processes and unlikely to be offered by software vendors, or you know they're not offered, then you should probably build a custom solution. But deciding what is best for your business does depend on a few factors, and that's what we're going to explore here. So firstly, relevance. How relevant or tailored is the intranet to your particular business and processes? Then there's the speed factor. How quickly can you can a useful intranet be up and running? That's the question there. Cost. How much does it cost, both in the short term and the longer term? And then the scope as well. How wide is the scope of the things that the intranet can do, that it can help your business with? What areas of the business can it touch and assist? And then there's access. How easy is it to allow access from anywhere, any device, any time? So what we're going to do is go through each of these factors and score each of custom build versus off-the-shelf with a score varying from a 1 to 3, with 1 being poor and 3 being good. So starting with relevance, if you deploy a custom build or an off-the-shelf intranet, how relevant will it be to your particular business? So starting with custom build, it can of course be made 100% relevant to your business since it's completely custom. So it's really going to score highly in this category, and there's not much else to say because it can be totally relevant. So we give it a 3 here. But looking at off the shelf, on the other hand, that's unlikely to be 100% relevant, of course. But many companies, as I've said before, tend to have fairly generic requirements for their intranet, and good intranet software vendors cater for those generic requirements well, or they tend to. Now that's not going to be 100% of the requirements, but a good portion of the requirements will probably be catered for. So the generic ones well catered for. Yes, but in order to increase the relevance, it's going to be important to choose the product that most closely aligns with your business needs. And the problem with that, though, is that, of course, those business needs will change over time. And you might find that over time, the intranet product becomes either less or more relevant to your business, depending on how your requirements change over time as well. So if you select wisely here, then this could be a 2, but select poorly and it could be a 1, to be honest. So let's give this one a 2 in this case. So off the shelf scores 2. So overall on the scores, custom build wins this one 3 to 2 on the relevance factor, and that's of course because it can be perfectly tailored to your organisation. Let's look at the next factor, which is speed. So which option would allow you to deliver an intranet that adds value but very quickly? Custom build, first of all. It's typically going to take a lot of time to do a custom build, because even before you start building or coding, you're going to have to spend a lot of time gathering requirements and writing the specification, and you'll probably have to create wireframes. Perhaps you'll need to do some early testing as well, using interactive prototypes with users. So this, it's likely to take a lot of time. There are many phases to work through. Now, if the project is really broad in scope as well, then there's a danger that this will take so long that the business imperatives actually change during the process. It's not unknown for the process for a large organisation to take 1 to 2 years, where although for a smaller organisation it's perhaps more realistic to see something like 3 to 6 months as a time scale for delivering a custom intranet. But overall, it's going to be fairly slow, so we'd have to give custom build a rating of 1 on the speed factor. So off the shelf, on the other hand, for speed, now you might think that off the shelf is going to be, click and install, up and running within an hour, which and that is true with some products, that is possible, but realistically, you're probably going to need to spend at least a few days researching your business, planning your intranet, and configuring it to make more sense for your business. And then also there's the need to train your admins and content owners, which is going to take some time. But overall, off the shelf, we're still looking at something much shorter in terms of timescales to deliver something that is useful to the business. So really, we should give off the shelf a 3 here for this. Okay, so on to the next factor. We have cost. So so far it's actually been quite easy to score the 2 different options. But when looking at costs, I think things become a little bit more complicated. We have to consider the initial purchase cost, the cost of implementation, ongoing management and maintenance, as well as any license fees that may apply as part of the product, for example. And all of these things are going to combine to give us a total cost of ownership. So first of all, looking at custom build, the first costs of the custom build are going to be the initial design and the implementation costs. And as we know from the previous step, custom builds can take time, and that means quite a lot of money up front typically. And also, the more ambitious the project and the broader the requirements, the more it's going to cost you, of course. And this is especially true if you want to develop an intranet which is very user-friendly and provides rich user experience. So to give you a very rough guide, we can deliver a basic custom-built intranet for around 25k, but you're looking at 7 figures and up when working on some bigger, more complicated projects. So then there's the implementation phase where you actually upload content, you train your admins and content owners, and you promote the new intranet. Now, arguably, this of course incurs a cost as well. Arguably, it's on a par with the off-the-shelf option because you also need to do those things with off-the-shelf. So roughly the same, probably, depending on the build. Then there's the ongoing management and maintenance. Now, this is an area that is going to be quite costly typically. You've built a custom application at the end of the day, and it's likely to be quite costly to maintain. You'll have to support the platform at multiple levels. You'll need to do content management and governance, user support, minor enhancements, break-fix support for the application, and software support for the platform that the intranet sits on, and often as well hardware support for the servers and so on. So quite high costs typically there. And then finally, license fees. Because you're building from scratch, you should save money here, of course, though you still will likely have some license fees for underlying technology. For example, if you're using SharePoint or if you're using Microsoft SQL Server databases, then you'll have fees for those things. So despite the lack of product license fees, the other costs have mounted up with this. So we've saved some money on license fees, but the other costs have really mounted up with this custom build route. And it's we'd have to give it a low score, I think, for cost because of that. So we give it a 1. It's going to cost a lot if you do it very well. It can be cheaper, of course, if you don't invest money in evolving it over time. Over a 5-year period, if you don't invest anything in evolving it, then you could save money and bring that score a bit higher. But that tactic is really likely to lessen its relevance significantly over time to the business. So it's not really an advisable strategy to take. So off the shelf, with off the shelf, the upfront cost is basically for design and build, and that's going to be much lower. Basically, it's just the cost for branding essentially. But the implementation will, of course, still involve some cost if you're going to do that properly. It's possibly going to be even on a par with the custom build route. You're still going to have to configure the intranet. You're going to have to add the content, train administrators and content owners, and so on. So there's parity here in the 2 options. Then there's the ongoing management and maintenance. and some of this cost will be internal and on a par with the custom build route, but responsibility for maintenance of the application, at least the intranet itself, will sit with the vendor typically, and they'll have the benefit of economies of scale. Their support teams will be supporting many customers using the same platform with the same application, so the cost should be lower there. Okay, but finally, there's of course on off-the-shelf the license fees, typically a per user monthly cost from the vendor, but in some cases it might be an upfront perpetual license fee for the software as a whole. This is the area where off-the-shelf costs, of course, will be higher, but what you get for this, at least in the case of the monthly per user cost, typically, is a constantly evolving intranet and feature set. And if you've selected a good vendor, hopefully as well some sort of guarantee that the software won't break over time when the underlying platform is updated and so on. So overall, we'd give the off-the-shelf option in this case for cost a slightly better score, slightly less expensive. So a 2 for that one. It's slightly cheaper typically than custom build, and to evolve over say a 5-year period, which you absolutely should be planning to do. Otherwise, your intranet will become much less relevant to the business. Okay. Next up is scope. So which route is going to give you a broader base of capability, allowing your intranet to actually deliver value in more areas of the business? So first of all, let's look at custom build. The custom build route, of course, offers you a blank canvas with limitless opportunities, essentially. But delivering lots of features across a broad range or a broad scope will certainly quickly eat up even the most a significant budget. So that's a slight downside of that. And it'll also take probably a long time to deliver. So therefore, it's really likely that you'd want to add to the scope of what the intranet can do over time, and basically just as it evolves. And a common way to do this is without reinventing the wheel, at least, is to integrate with many other business systems that you're using, and help the whole thing to become a combined system. But then, because of the need to build these integrations yourself, because you're in a custom route, you are likely to face additional costs to do that, versus an off-the-shelf product that might have pre-built integrations. So realistically, in order to not exacerbate the cost element and the time element that we've already looked at, you're probably going to limit the scope of your custom build intranet. So we'll give the score here for custom build, we'll give it a 2 in this case because of that. Off the shelf though, for scope, an off-the-shelf product, particularly a mature one that's been around for a while, is likely to offer a wide range of features and pre-built integrations with other commonly used systems in businesses, like customer relationship management systems, CRMs, and learning management systems. And this means that right out of the box, essentially, there's a lot of potential to add value in many different areas of the business. And this can be made available also very quickly and relatively cheaply in the short term. Also, if the product is provided as part of a monthly per user cost model, like software as a service or SaaS, then there'll be a roadmap typically of new features that will be drip fed into the product as time goes on, and this will further boost the potential scope of your intranet. And so, over time as well, with that kind of growth in the scope, I think if you choose a mature product, then the score really here should be 3. So we give it a 3 in this particular dimension of scope. score of 3-2 here. Off the shelf snatches victory just about. Because of that broadness of the scope out of the box, and because of the fact that if you're with a product that's well established and continually updating, that scope is going to expand, and you'll have the option to make use of additional features there. And then finally, we've got access. So with the arrival of bring your own device, or BYOD policies, greater levels of remote working and proliferation, of smartphones, how and when and and from what device you access the intranet is changing dramatically, or has changed dramatically. So which of the two options is going to be better for that? Custom build, first of all. As we've already seen, a custom build intranet gives you lots of control and a broad scope. So providing access from pretty much any device is from any location is certainly possible, but it can be difficult. It can be quite complex to set up to make that work. To begin with, you'll need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, an infrastructure that enables connection to be established from anywhere using just an internet connection, perhaps using VPN, perhaps not. Then you will also need to make sure that your UI, your user interface, is actually optimized for multiple devices, including smartphones and tablets. And this actually, this adds a lot of time to the design, the development, and the testing of the intranet, of the initial build, and also any incremental or further improvements that you add after that. It can be done, but it all comes again at a higher cost. Okay, so overall on custom build, given what we've said here about access, it can be done, but it's quite complicated really to do that. So we'd give it just a 1 on this particular factor. Now we'll look at off-the-shelf. Off-the-shelf intranets are usually, or at least should be, built with modern working in mind, front of mind. Therefore, they've already, the developers, the producers of the software have typically already done a lot of the hard work of designing and implementing an infrastructure that supports access from multiple devices in different locations, and also they have typically user interface support for different devices baked in to their solutions and processes for building their systems, with expert user experience designers and front-end developers making sure that you're going to get the best possible experience from those different devices, and that everything's compatible. So I think that ease of access really typically is a core strength of the majority of off-the-shelf intranet products, particularly if it is a cloud-hosted or vendor-hosted solution. If you have an off-the-shelf intranet on an on-premise environment within your company, you're still probably going to have some of those infrastructure hoops to jump through, and it's going to be a bit more complicated to set up remote working. But certainly for a vendor-hosted solution, it's going to be much, much easier. So we'd give that a 3 for the access factor here. Okay, so just going on then to the final scores here. We've gone through those 5 different categories. We've rated the 2 options in terms of relevance, speed, cost, scope, and access. And looking at the overall score, we've got 11 for custom build, and we have 14 for off-the-shelf. So off-the-shelf wins against on these factors, but although it has come out on top here in our ratings, it doesn't mean, of course, that off-the-shelf is right for everyone. It's if control and relevance are the absolute focus for your business, and you are prepared to spend whatever it takes and wait, then custom build would easily be the best option. It just all depends on where your priorities lie. It's clear that in some areas a custom build approach is better, and that's why it's. But in others, of course, it's important that it could be the case that an off-the-shelf solution is better, and that's why it's actually very important to run always a discovery project before actually, ideally, you select a route, because you can understand during that discovery process where your organisation's priorities and business needs truly lie. You can then make an informed decision about which route is going to be best for your business based on the outcome of that research. You might think that you already know the answers to those questions, and you may actually know the answers to those questions, but it's still worth validating that you are right and validating your position, because it's going to be a long road ahead, and it's going to be difficult and expensive to change course if you've made the wrong decision. So definitely worth doing a discovery project. Okay, so what about company size though? If you're a smaller company, how does that affect things? Does that change the picture here? Well, it depends on the company, of course, but for the most part, smaller companies tend to be better off with an off-the-shelf route for the following reasons. So first of all, smaller companies tend to work faster and more flexibly, so the speed with which you can actually start using an off-the-shelf intranet will be an advantage there. The costs, especially the initial sort of investment costs up front, are much lower, and also there's less reliance on in-house technical support and knowledge, which is usually a benefit for smaller companies. Unless you're a software development company or you have a big internal development team, then you're not likely to have the right personnel in place on board to effectively manage a custom build. So yeah, generally speaking, for smaller companies, the off-the-shelf route does make more sense. But so far, is there a middle ground? So far we've talked about delivering an intranet in two different ways, where you do your research and then you choose one route or the other. But what if actually you're not sure still? It's a big call and a big commitment, and maybe there's actually an off-the-shelf product that allows you to also customize, giving you essentially the best of both worlds. Well, that is actually the kind of question we asked ourselves a few years ago, and that's actually why we've chosen to resell Wisdom and have since become the exclusive UK partner for Wisdom. It's basically, Wisdom is an off-the-shelf intranet product for SharePoint. It gives you over 50 features out of the box, ready to use within weeks rather than months or years. But crucially, it does something that many other off-the-shelf solutions don't do, which is it installs natively into SharePoint, meaning that you can actually build custom features around it and add in other third-party apps right alongside it. And this makes it this also makes integrating other systems like CRM or ERP really easy, and it gives a completely seamless experience for your users. So I'm just going to quickly jump to a demo site for Wisdom just to show you a couple of things here. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so here's the homepage of a Wisdom intranet site. This is just a demo site that we have, and yeah, so I basically have the homepage here, and as you can see, each of the elements on the page are these kind of blocks, which are web parts in SharePoint terminology, and some of these are Wisdom web parts or features. But if we had a third-party web part or a custom web part that we developed ourselves that we wanted to add into this page alongside the Wisdom web parts, we can do that. It's native SharePoint that you can still add web parts to pages alongside the Wisdom ones. So you have a lot of control there to add features. But you're doing that on top of the stuff that Wisdom provides. So you have things like the notification bar here that tells you about mentions or comments or alerts to certain content that's targeted at you based on your role or your profile within the company. You also have features like an easy to configure and build mega menu system. And if I just go quickly into the administration screen, this is where you can actually make all of those configurations as an administrator. So there's a WYSIWYG interface, a graphical user interface for you to configure the intranet, the Wisdom intranet, to your particular needs. So if I go into one of the apps here, the Mega Menu, for example, I can click in and go to the menu builder, and no code. I'm just building things with drag and drop and adding in content and that sort of thing. And there's a whole range of administration like this for each of the different features. So it's highly configurable. You can actually make a Wisdom intranet look very different for a different business. Not just look, but function very differently for different businesses. So there's a lot of power there. But as I said, also, you have the option to add in your custom-built components or other third-party web parts right alongside the Wisdom ones. So that's some of the advantages of the Wisdom approach, and it gives you a little bit the best of both worlds. I'm just going to switch back to the presentation now. Okay, so what all that means, basically, you're not forced to choose between a traditional off-the-shelf product or going it alone, so to speak, with a custom build. You can install and configure and launch a fully featured Wisdom intranet within a couple of weeks. If you work quickly, you can do that. But and provide value to the business that early, with all the features that are available. But then in the background, you could be developing the custom components that you need and roll them out to the business as they become available, while the business is already using all the other features. So your employees would see the Wisdom elements and custom elements as they're introduced as one and the same thing. They won't be jumping from one system to another. They're all on the same page or in the same system. So over the last 10 years, we've worked on hundreds of intranets, and we've observed that on average, an intranet is pretty much 80% the same in terms of features and content, or types of content. I don't mean the actual content itself, but the types of content. Every intranet has news and department pages and policies and procedures, for example. And only the remaining 20% or so is specific to the organisation. And this is why off-the-shelf products have become so prevalent. But the problem with most of the off-the-shelf products is that they only give you the first 80%. And to get to 100%, you have to go the custom build route, and that, of course, is a long and costly road. So the Wisdom approach, which we like so much, is that it's been designed to negate the need to do that, and it delivers the 80% early on, and then you can add 20% over time on top of that, on top of the first 80%. So that's the benefits of it. Okay, great. So just finally then, we have some time for questions. If anyone has a question, if you could just type the question into the little questions box, and we will read through those and pick some out to answer as best we can in the time we've got left. So I'll just go into that now and take a look at what's coming in. Okay. Okay, so we've got one here. Just reading through these. Okay, so yeah, a comment here about somebody who works in internal comms, and the intranet that they work on is based on SharePoint 2013. For some things it seems to work well, but for others it seems it was designed with like IT professionals in mind, versus your average business user. Hard to maintain and add new features without becoming a SharePoint expert. So yeah, and that means she's not sure why it's so popular for intranets, the SharePoint platform. So I agree. When you're using SharePoint out of the box, it's actually quite well, certainly previous versions like the 2013, quite clunky and not particularly usable for somebody who isn't an IT professional. I certainly agree with that. It's actually a bit like a toolkit. There's lots of sort of raw components that you need to do a lot with to make them work well together. There's a lot of power there, but yeah, you need to know what you're doing to get the best out of it, definitely. That's kind of what the off-the-shelf products have been trying to do, the ones that are based on SharePoint. They're kind of trying to use some of the SharePoint features and make them much more user-friendly to business users, that you don't require coders or developers and so on. So if that is a big concern of yours, then typically it's probably an off-the-shelf route is going to be better for you, because it's going to put more power in the hands of the business users who aren't IT professionals, who don't know how to code and so on. Then typically that route will help you more. But having said that, you do need to be careful with the selection of the tools, because you'll need IT professionals to help you choose the correct solution. So yeah, bear that in mind when you're selecting a product. Will the slides be available after the presentation? Yes, they will. We'll make those available. Okay, so just reading through it again. How would Wisdom score on your off-the-shelf versus bespoke build in terms of cost? Well, I mean, we've kind of thought of, we've given off-the-shelf products, generally speaking, a cost assignment. If you want to look at the cost within a group of off-the-shelf products, the best thing to do probably is look at an independent report, like there's a report from Clearbox Consulting. They're an independent UK-based intranet consultancy company. They've done a review of something like 26, I think, intranet products in a box. Wisdom's in there, and there's a cost metric included. So if you go to clearbox.co.uk, you can find that report, and that's probably the best place to look for comparisons in terms of prices. Okay, there's a question about performance. What are the effects on performance? My answer to that is going to be, it depends, of course, because there are, with a custom build, you could build it in a way that it performs terribly. If you've not got the right hardware powering it, it can perform terribly. If you've coded it inefficiently, it can perform terribly. Equally, it could be performing beautifully, and the same is true of an off-the-shelf solution. It's really just going to come down to making sure that if you're not confident about your internal team's ability to build something effectively and with optimal performance, then perhaps the off-the-shelf route is the way to go. But ask about benchmarks and test, and ability to test, load test, and so on. So there's another question here. Actually, I'm not sure I quite understand that question. Okay, so the next question, is this more for on-premise or for Office 365 or hybrid? So it's a good question, because you might be restricted. You've got an on-premise environment only, you can't use cloud for whatever reason. You'll then need to make sure that if you were looking at off-the-shelf products, of course, that they support an on-premise installation. Some do, some don't. Some are cloud only, for example. So you need to make sure that it does support that option for you. And even if they do support it, there might be some differences in the process for deployment. There's always, typically with on-site install, there's going to be some additional work done around the installation process and making sure the hardware is set up in an optimal way, etc. So there's probably going to be a slight rise in cost there, unless you can do it yourself. But yeah, by no means does an on-premise setup mean that you can't use an off-the-shelf product. Just like on Windows, if you buy an application, you can install it. You don't have to use it through the cloud. Same sort of scenario. You can buy an internet solution and install it into your on-premise servers. Wisdom, by the way, is available as hybrid on-premise or Office 365. Another question that's come in here. Okay, so performance, if you have offices in different regions, yeah, this is going to be a consideration. If you're going to be doing it on-premise, for example, where are the servers based? You need to think about the impact that might have on regions that are accessing that service that are in far-flung areas of the world, and maybe having a setup where it's actually, there are duplicate servers in different countries, and if you're going the off-the-shelf route, of course, ask those questions to the vendor and ask them about the speed from different locations. Perhaps you can do some tests with them on some demo environment, for example, to make sure that you're happy with the performance that or the speed that you're getting from those different locations. It's definitely one to have on your check sheet for when evaluating an off-the-shelf product. Okay, so a question about wisdom here. Do you start with wisdom as a big bang, or is it suitable for a growth path? Well, I think we do advocate launching early with a sort of pared down version of an intranet, particularly if you're replacing an obsolete intranet and you want to start to build trust, and perhaps trust was completely eroded in the old intranet, and you want to launch something focused and works really well early, get people thinking, oh, actually this is really good, and then continually add in new stuff and new value and adapt your course slightly as you go based on the feedback you're getting. That approach we absolutely advocate. I think that you can have that approach with either a custom build or an off-the-shelf product, and I think that wisdom is equally suited to that approach. Launch with something very focused and specific early, and then either turn on the additional features over time or add in your custom components. It's completely possible to do that. But yeah, as a whole, just general principle would advocate the launch early, launch something smaller scale, works really well, and get sort of buy-in basically from your user base. Okay, so what are the key factors for the decision, custom build or off the shelf? I think, well, we've tried to summarize those into 5 things here. I think they're the 5 main things that you should look at. So consider each of those factors and the points we've made and decide whether or not each of those things, how important that is to your business and your intranet. And if the emphasis, as I said, is on sort of the control and the kind of the relevance to the business, the accuracy of how well it maps against your business, it has to be 100% exact and perfect, then maybe the custom, and you've got perhaps an internal development team who are well versed in building these kinds of products, then you could go the custom build route. But if you want to have something early, you want to outsource support and not have a big internal team, then off the shelf is going to be the way to go, and just picking the right one is going to be the important thing. Okay, so think of seeing if there are any other questions here. Okay, well, I think I've gone through all the ones that I can here. So yeah, I think unless Dan, you've got anything else to say, it's time roughly for us to wrap up anyway, because we're nearly at the end of the session. So. Yeah, we'll be sending out the slides, and happy to answer any additional questions that come in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been recording the session today, so we're going to make that recording available. And if you want the slides as well, we can send those to you. Just get in touch. And yeah, if you want to organise a demo, or you want to learn more about Wisdom, or in fact, even if you want to learn more about our other services, maybe you've decided that actually bespoke intranet is the way you need to go, then we'd be able to help you with that kind of thing as well. So do get in touch. Go to our website, contentformula.com. There's all manner of ways of reaching us. But we hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you very much for coming along.